Hey, folks, welcome. It's a new season of Get to Know Dynatrace. We've had a long summer. It was a very eventful one for me. I visited Newfoundland. I was out in Chicago. I went to a jazz festival. I made the most of my summer. But what's really cool is it's the fall. The kids are back in school now, and it's time for us to get back to our sessions of Get to Know Dynatrace. So my name's David Jones. Everyone calls me Jonesy. Feel free. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to walk through a whole bunch of things all about Dynatrace. Now, what makes Get to Know Dynatrace so special is your participation. So wherever you are coming to us from, across the globe, feel free to interact with us. Drop questions into the chat window of whatever you're using to watch us on. If it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, Twitch, whatever it might be, feel free to drop a comment in there. Drop a question. That's what makes Get to Know Dynatrace so special and so interesting and so much fun. It's your participation. It's your questions. Now, as always, when we do Get to Know Dynatrace, we have a couple of upfront segments. And so the very first segment, let me get started here. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Here we go. The very first segment that we have for Get to Know Dynatrace is always what's new. Well, I said it was a long summer, and I wasn't joking. We actually, over the summer, we were really busy. I mean, really busy. So you can see here by going to dynatrace.com/news/blog, all of the different articles and stories that we've posted, all of the different things that are going on here at Dynatrace. Some of them are super exciting for us. Like, for example, we got mentioned and named as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant once again for the 14th consecutive time. That's super exciting. Congratulations on all of the hard work from all of the Dynatrace team who have been working on making the Dynatrace platform so successful. It's great to see that industry recognition. There's been other things going on. You can see here that we've been adding content around, identifying new SQL injection vulnerabilities. You can see here that we're having writing articles about leveling up your Kubernetes experience with new Dynatrace dashboards. I'll come back to that one in a minute. You can see here that we've got articles that outline things like the 6 causes of major software outages, and one of the articles that I was particularly interested in was this one by our CTO Bernd. Now, in this article, he outlines, basically, how real-time business analytics with Dynatrace really helps organizations, unleash a gold mine of answers that the business is probably not even aware that they can go to Dynatrace for getting this type of information. And this is one of the things that I find particularly exciting about what Dynatrace is doing and where we're headed. Observability, in the past, we always think of classic observability, your metrics, your traces, your logs, in the context of, hey, I want to make my software work perfectly. But you know what? There's a whole bunch of information that resides within that observability data that can be used to help your business answer business questions. And we're doing a lot more when it comes to business analytics. Our new business events feature, for example, is a perfect, it is a perfect example of one of the new capabilities that we're bringing to the market that allows people to really get value of the data that is being collected through these what have been in the past these traditional sort of observability approaches. It's a super interesting article. I highly recommend that you go give that a read. So a couple of other things in terms of what's new. You may or may not be aware that we're already planning for Dynatrace Perform 2025 in Vegas. We're going to be back at the Aria Hotel. We were there last year. It was a great venue. It was the biggest one that we've done to date. I'm expecting this one to be even bigger. Now, what makes Perform so wonderful is not just the content, it's the opportunity to interact with your peers. And ask them questions around, how are they utilizing Dynatrace to get business value for their organizations. There is just a tremendous amount of content. It's a fun venue. I highly, highly recommend it. One of the things that you'll want to keep in mind is there is effectively some early bird pricing that you can still take advantage of. This is available up until September 30th. After September 30th, you can see that the pricing starts to creep up a bit. So if you can plan ahead, do that right now. Take advantage of this. You save yourself some of the fees in terms of getting that access to that event. And this is something that I highly recommend. It's just like between the hot days, the hands-on training. These are just really, really well-reviewed, very fun event. So remember, Perform 2025. So let's head on to our next segment, which is Did You Know? Now, I said something about some Kubernetes dashboards, and I said, put a pin in that for a second. Well, hey, did you know that there's even more out-of-the-box K8 dashboards? So, Dynatrace, we always focus on innovation. We're constantly releasing new capabilities to our platform. So every 2 weeks, you're always going to see new functionality, new capabilities being released into the Dynatrace platform. This is a perfect example of what we do when we actually release these new capabilities. Here, as an example, what you can see is we've now got, out-of-the-box dashboards for, getting visibility into your overall Kubernetes cluster. But then if you need to drill down and actually get some of the details of what's going on, there's a dashboard now for your Kubernetes nodes and pods. There's a dashboard now specifically for your Kubernetes names, you to view your Kubernetes namespaces by pod, and there's a view that allows you to actually see the persistent volumes of your Kubernetes. So you can see that, we're always adding more capabilities, new capabilities. This is a perfect example of that. And so that was this session's Did You Know? All right, folks, it's now time for the best part of Get to Know Dynatrace. Without further ado, it is demo time. And this week, our guest solution engineer is Omar Zaal. Hey, Omar, how you doing?
Hey, Jonesy, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today. Yep.
Oh, hey, Omar, it's absolutely our pleasure. So, hey, Omar, before we actually get into the demo, tell us a little bit about yourself. How you're a solution engineer now. What were you doing before you were a solution engineer here at Dynatrace?
Yeah, so I joined Dynatrace almost 4 years ago. So it was in January of 2021, actually. And I first started off as a consultant. So I worked for one of the big banks out here in Canada. I'm actually located in Canada, by the way. And I was working as a consultant for about 3 years. And the past few months, I transitioned into a solution engineering role. And it's been a great experience so far. I've loved it.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, listen, Omar, thank you so much for joining us today and walking us through the demo. Now, before we hand things all the way over to Omar, this is where I make that plug again. And that plug is what makes Get to Know Dynatrace so special are your questions. So as we're going through today's demonstration, if you have questions, feel free to just type them into that little chat window and we'll do our very best to get those answered. And with that, Omar, it's your show. Over to you.
All right. Perfect. So let me just get my screen going here. Okay. So so the previous getting to know Dynatrace sessions, I've seen quite a bit about showing what Dynatrace is as an observability tool, a lot of the APM that we do. But today I really want to dive into some of the newer features that actually Jonesy was just talking about. He was talking about some of the business analytics that we have, some of the logs and whatnot. And that's really what I want to focus today in on. As many of you know, we actually have the app engine within Dynatrace, mainly Dynatrace SaaS, and we've got quite a bit of new features and apps in here that we've gotten quite a lot of feedback about, very positive typically. But I want to show off, a couple of them today. So when you first launch Dynatrace, you're going to see, probably a new page for some people, but a lot of people have already gotten used to this page. And if you click on the apps here, you'll see quite a bit of apps that are available for us. And the ones I want to focus on is, let's start off with the new Problems app. So we have the Problems Classic, but I want to show the new Problems app. This is still a work in progress, but it's pretty much there. We've got all the problems that are showing in here. We can correlate quite a bit of the logs and entities in here. So it's a new view. It uses the App Engine and Dynatrace Grail, so DQL in the back end, to actually build this app and display all this data for you. So I'm just going to start off by showing, this new view right here. You can see we have the problems displayed in the past 24 hours here. I can just start clicking on, let's say I want to choose one that has a failure rate degradation. So I have this problem right here. It's somewhat similar to our classic dash problems view, where we're able to see the events, the SLOs that are affected, how many affected users, the affected entities and whatnot. But the cool thing about this now is you're able to see the affected entities in full view here. And I can see, for example, this is my root cause entity right here for my problem, which is a failure rate increase. And I can start seeing some of the properties on the right-hand side. So I can see the what my error rate increase was. I can see some of the properties of which service method this happened on, and the client-side service error increase rate as well. But if I want to focus in on some of the newer features that we're seeing, because people are already used to seeing the cool stuff about Dynatrace, about how we show the root cause, how we display all this information for you, I mainly want to focus in on the DQL backend of this app and how it's super useful and people love it so far. So if I just click on the logs tab right here, is that I can see the last 100 errors right away, but just by clicking run query, and it's going to filter by the services that I have in that problem. So just from one click, I can already have Dynatrace build out a query for me for my error and warning logs, and it's going to display it for me in an organized fashion. And I can start looking into these queries and what's going on with them, and just dive deep into what's interesting about my errors. You couldn't do this before, but now you can even show the logs in the current context. So I don't only want to look at my error and warning logs. I want to look at all my logs. I can start seeing, hey, what happened before my error happened? What was going on within my events? And this is something that is very cool from a client perspective and from Dynatrace perspective to see our clients take advantage of these new capabilities within the new Problems app. Now, again,
Hey, Omar, but before you go any further, so this is brand new sort of capabilities.
Yep.
So tell me, in the past, if we were trying to get a better understanding as to what was going on with the logs, how would we typically do that? Like, let me ask you the question this way. You worked
Mhm.
at a couple of big financial institutions. When they were trying to investigate a problem, and I know that they likely had multiple tools. How were they able to figure out what's what?
Yeah, so actually, the main financial institutions I was working with, they had, like you said, a bunch of different tools. So what they had to do is they find the problem within Dynatrace. They see, hey, here's our root cause, here are affected entities, but they didn't have those logs in context within Dynatrace. So it's not a unified view. They would then take that information that we gave them and then go start manually searching in a different tool. And that took a lot of time. App teams didn't like it. There was a lot of business impact. The people were complaining about it. But now with Dynatrace is we show you those log lines within context. It's all in one view. We correlate everything for you, and it's a super simple process. It's a unified view as opposed to before you have multiple tools, you're scattering around, and people don't really know what to do at that point.
Yeah, it just sounds
Yeah.
so much easier. Hey, that's great. Thanks very much. Sorry for interrupting. Keep going. Keep
Yeah,
going.
no, perfect. Yeah. So to build onto the logs case, because this is a new problems app, is just showing you some of the logs. What I really wanted to show today was the new logs app, and that's something that people have loved so far. And this is the new screen for it. So we've had a logs app from before, but it didn't really have the same capabilities that this one has. And I'm going to show off some of those today. So when I first come to into this app, I can just click run query. And what this is going to do is going to show me all my logs for the last 30 minutes. Now, keep in mind, this is only going to show in the UI the last 1,000 records, because Chrome would crash if we show, let's say, the last 50,000. But so I just click run query and I'm able to see all my logs. So this is my info logs, my warn logs, my error logs, anything that's available, it's going to show into the screen. And the really cool thing about this is that this is essentially running DQL queries in the background. So you don't have to go ahead and start writing your own DQL queries. It's just click, and we'll get you exactly where you want to go. And I'm just going to show off, for example, if you want to look at only your error logs, I can just come in here, click error, run that query. And for the last 30 minutes, these are going to be my error logs. And this is something that people have loved in comparison to what they're used to from before, where they have to go in and start writing their own query, or even a different tool, they also write their own query. This is just clicking and we're going to get you exactly where you want to go. So right here, these are all my error logs. But let's say you want to look at it in a bit more context, and you want to understand, for example, you want to only look at your logs for your application. And this is where the filtering comes into play. So if I just click on this plus symbol right here, I can see I have 373 available filters, right? And these are obviously per tenant and whatnot, but typically people have over 50 available filters that they can look through. The main ones that I see people use is these hidden columns, because these are your values that we see. So for example, if I want to look at based off a service name or a warehouse, for example, I can just click on this, and now it's going to show me a warehouse. For example, some of my logs contain a warehouse, this shipment service return. I can see that this log line is coming from my Nevada warehouse. So again, just clicking, I'm able to start filtering through my logs efficiently, and I don't have to be an expert within Dynatrace, within the DQL language. And
Hey, Omar, pardon me. So another question about this. That's super interesting, but what kind of effort does it take for me to be able to, there's 102 different columns there. Does that mean I have to create 102 specific rules to filter out this information? That sounds like a lot of regex work.
No. This is basically mostly done automatic for you. Is that Dynatrace looks at these fields, we understand how your logs are curated, and then we try to extract values. Now, we can do log processing as well on top of this if you want to get very granular. And that's where some of our clients that have more advanced use cases get into. But mostly, for example, if I look at this DT entity host, we're automatically extracting that for you, and we're showing you this column, where this log line is coming from, the exact topology. And this is where, if I click on the view details, this is where it gets really interesting, is that for the content of this log, I can start automatically, Dynatrace is going to automatically do this for me, looking at all the topology. So I can see where this host, where this log line is coming from, which host, which process instance, which process group, the log source that's coming from, and then I can scroll down, I can start seeing some of those fields. So for example, which availability zone it's in, what's my Bosch name, what's my Cloud Foundry instance. So all this information is being automatically populated and put into context for you by Dynatrace. And obviously before, we don't really see this much in the industry, but this is where logs and Dynatrace in one view become really powerful. Now, one thing I want to show is, let me deselect some of these that I just selected, just so it's easy for viewers to see this, is that Dynatrace doesn't just take the logs and just show you in this cool display. Like I showed, you can see all the topology, but we can even link logs to traces. And it's all done by just clicking. You don't have to go ahead and start searching for the trace where this log came from. I can just click on this log line. I can see here open trace. I'm just going to click on it, and now I'm going to open it in the distributed traces app that I have available for me. And it's going to start showing me where this trace came from, what's the log line associated with it, and all the context that I would need in order to actually look at what's happening with this error. So in this example, here's my trace. I can see it's for my hipster shop logs application, and I can see all the service, the host, and whatnot. And here is the exact log line that we were looking at from before. And the cool thing about this is that you can go vice versa. You can go logs to traces, traces to logs. So very, very easy to use and super powerful when you're actually looking at an error.
Whoa. Hold
Yep.
on. So you're telling me, that you can automatically connect the traces and the logs? Like, what kind of this sounds like I've got to sit down and like put like a whole bunch of effort into, creating some sort of complex regex. And then, how would I, like, I'm trying to think of how would I do this if I was using like tools like, say, Prometheus or Jaeger or stuff like that. Like I know open source technologies. That just sounds like a whole bunch of work. And I use regex as an example because I know a lot of people probably have a little PTSD trying to sit down and figure out how to filter something using something like regex.
Yeah, actually, at my previous internship when I was still in school, we had to do that where we had to start correlating some logs, and it was we were using open source tools, and it was a pain to do that. But with Dynatrace, it's automatic. So the OneAgent is going to automatically pick up all this information for you, correlate the topology, the traces, the logs, the metrics, everything for you automatically, and put it into one view. Whether it's a problem card, whether it's this traces view, or it's the logs view. So this is the power of Dynatrace of, what we can do automatically. No regexes, no settings. It's all done automatically for you.
That it's funny that we're talking about how automatic everything is. Like it just basically it works, right? It just this stuff is very simple to deploy, and it does a lot of the things in the background that people would consider to be magical. So we had a question come in. Maybe we could flash that question up one more time. And the question was, is it recommended to automate the OneAgent installation on Linux systems? Omar, what's your take on this? I'm happy to take a stab at it too.
Yeah, typically what I would see at most of the clients that I work with, automating installations is the way to go because it's typically easy either way. But having some sort of automated system to just run through those command lines to install the OneAgent, although it's only like 2 of them, is the recommended way to go. And the nice thing about it is that you can install the OneAgent and we have different modes. So you can always switch between those different modes in case you don't want to get the most full stack view of your host. You can just put it into Foundation Discovery and it's there for you, and it's barely consuming anything. So I don't know, what's your take on that, Jonesy?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like to your point, the installation's really simple. It's just a couple of command lines. You can use things like Chef, Puppet, Ansible to automate your deployments. We even have some customers that take the machine, basically take that installer, bury it into the machine image, so that when a new machine is created, that agent all of a sudden pops up and checks in with the Dynatrace cluster and says, I'm here. So it can be that automated. Now, you know what? The thing is, though, what I've learned over the years in this industry is that there's always caveats, right? Yes, absolutely, it can be automated. But there may be situations where, for security reasons, sensitivity of the machines, the versions of software that are running on it, you might want to just sort of, investigate and look at that and make sure, is it a good candidate, for that sort of automatic instrumentation. But yeah, absolutely, you can, for the most part, automatically install the agent across Linux machines. Great question. Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry, Omar. That's what Get to Know Dynatrace is. People just asking questions. So
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
let's keep
Ask
going.
away.
Yeah.
No worries. Yep. Yeah. So again, so what kind of where I left off at is that we can go from logs to traces, traces to logs. So that's the really cool part about Dynatrace. And even here within the trace, you can start looking at the code level visibility. So if you're a developer, this is where developers love Dynatrace, is that they can come into the code level, they can start seeing exactly what's happening, they can start looking at the timings of those services, the response breakdown, and they're able to alleviate whatever situation they had really, really quickly. So I'm just going to hop back into the Logs app and just show a few more things before I jump into another app, because mainly today I do want to show off a couple of different apps. Some are related, some are different, but I do want to show off a bunch of those apps today. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some of these error logs and run that query. And um, yeah, so right here, right now, is the main use case of this is just, to show you the logs. But let's say you have all these error logs and you want to do a full-on investigation of what's happening within my app. Where are my errors? And you want to start, being proactive, looking into Dynatrace and seeing what's going on with my app. And I'm going to show a typical flow of what we see users happening whenever they do investigation, whether that's a security investigation or looking at my application performance. Is that typically the log span analysis is that we typically see a security report or breach or some sort of error happening. We start fetching the data, and the information is always presented in an organized linear fashion. Typically, whenever we get to the end of the investigation, so we filter the data, we filter the IP address, we do some enrichment, we do a bit more filtering, we summarize, and then we take some remediation actions. And that's a great way to visualize and digest information, but this is actually far from the truth. This doesn't happen in the actual world. What really happens is a flow like this, where you fetch the data, you go to the filter IP address, do some enrichment, and then go back a step, go forward a step, go back a step. So it's not really as linear as you may think. And this is where we see a lot of our clients struggling with, is that it comes with a number of challenges where keeping the context is very hard for your investigation. There's no logical hierarchy for the executed queries. You're always creating new sections, and you're manually writing down some sort of IP addresses or some sort of enrichment information. Documentation is very manual, and you're trying to correlate all this investigation in your head or in like a manual notebook. And this is where one of our newer apps comes
Hey,
into play.
actually, hold on a second, Omar.
Yep.
Either your screen froze or we're not
Oh,
seeing that notebook.
let me fix that real quick. You should be
And
seeing.
thank you to the folks online for letting us know that.
Oh, yep. Let me share my other screen. Apologies for that. Okay, so you guys should be seeing a presentation like so. Is this screen sharing? There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that was popping up on the screen. So yeah, I'll just start off again where I was explaining, is that, when you typically have an investigation, you typically go from fetching the data to filtering the IP address to enrichment to filtering more and then summarizing, and then at the end take some remediation action. So this is a very linear approach, and it looks great. It's great to facilitate it this way, but this doesn't actually happen in the real world. What really happens is something like this, and this is what I was trying to show earlier, is that you're going to go back and forth between these steps. You're going to go fetching data, filtering, enrichment, enrich some more, filter some more, summarize, then take action remediation steps from there. So it's not as linear as you may think. So in the real world, this is the actual flow of what happens. And again, what I was mentioning before of you need to manually notate all these steps. You need to keep track of the logical hierarchy for your queries. Well, what did you do? What IP address did you find out? And this is where the new app, which is called the Security Investigator, comes into play. And I'm just going to really quickly create a new case here. So I'm just going to jump back into my Dynatrace tenant, and I'm going to start executing some queries. Again, what I'm trying to show here is the ease of use of some of these apps, where you don't have to be an expert at DQL or some of their query length or some of their query features. You can just go through this entire investigation just by clicking. And so when I first did here is I did fetch logs. So I can see here, this is where I execute my queries, and these are my results. I'm going to start explaining the stuff on the right-hand side in a minute, but
Actually, Omar, before you get
yep.
too deep into this, and I'm super excited to see this because I know this is new functionality and very few people are aware of this. But we did
Yep.
have another question that came in. So maybe
Mhm.
we could flash that question back up. So the topics we were mentioning, what would be the best way to learn and be familiar with Dynatrace for personal use and gaining experience with it? So that's a fabulous question. My first response would be is uh, go to something first off to get access to all of the resources that I'm going to talk about. Give Dynatrace a try. Download a free trial. Go to dynatrace.com/free trial and sign up for a free trial. That will give you access to the Dynatrace platform, the full platform, for at least a couple of weeks. And what that will also do, though, is that will also give you access to things like Dynatrace University, where we have courseware. It'll give you access to the Dynatrace community, where we have literally thousands of other people who all use Dynatrace, sharing their experience, asking questions, learning about it. Some of the things that I learned recently that I hadn't been paying attention to, but actually there's some really interesting content out there, is even things like Udemy, for example. There's some excellent Udemy courses around using Dynatrace that I would recommend, and they're not expensive at all. I think they're like like $25 or something like that. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can get to know more about Dynatrace. And like I said, sign up for a free trial, get access to the university, check out the community, check out some of the resources out there like Udemy. There's tons of content on YouTube. Great question. Thanks for that. Okay, so Omar, I apologize. Back
Yep.
to you. Let's find out more about this security investigator. This is
Yep.
super interesting.
Yeah, I actually see a question in the chat as well I'd like to address. Is someone said
Okay.
that I would love to see security investigator templates to give a head start on some of the types of queries used in a typical investigation. So that is a great question as well. Uh, Currently, we are going to come out with some templates for you to use and some examples. We don't have those publicly available right now, but I have seen some templates that we will have within the Dynatrace documentation. So likely when you just go to the security investigation investigator documentation, those templates will be available for you. Okay, hopefully that
Cool.
answered
All
that
right.
question.
Let's keep going. Let's get through this, and then we'll take a block of questions.
Yep, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so for the security investigator right now is all I've done so far is fetching logs. And let's say I want to kind of like a previous example where I want to look at the log level of where my logs are coming from. So I can just click in here. So double click on one of these log lines and I'm able to see the record details. For example, the timestamp, the content. I can even expand the content by just double clicking on it. And I can see all these different levels of information for me. But let's just say I want to start building out a query. I can just right click and I can do filter for, or I can just right click here and do a summarize. So let's say I want to do a summarize. I'm just going to have that Dynatrace input it for me and run the query again. And then again, I didn't type anything. I'm able to see I have all these different log levels available and the counts of them. So, I have quite a bit of info and error logs within my environment, within this demo environment. But let's say I want to focus in on only the alert level logs. And again, I can just click filter for. I'm going to get rid of this count just so it's not showing there anymore. But now all these logs are only alert level logs, and I'm able to quickly view them in an organized fashion. And the really cool thing about what's happening here is I mentioned earlier how when you're doing investigation, you don't have a logical hierarchy of what queries you ran and what you're doing. If you pay attention to the right-hand side right here, I'm seeing a query tree, meaning that all my past queries are saved for me. They're cached. So if I were to click on query 2 here, it's it's going to save that query for me. It's also going to save the results for me available for right away. So I don't have to run the query again and go through it all over again. It's saving that logical hierarchy for me, and I'm able to traverse back and forth through it and see exactly what I was doing. And I can even write down some notes for each step for later on. But this is really how cool this app is. And to go a bit further into it is that, okay, I looked at the log alert level, but I want to investigate a bit more. I want to actually look into what's happening within a certain deployment. So for my K8 deployments, I can start looking, okay, what K8 deployments do I have that have, let's say, an alert log level? Uh, I only have this insights operator and only has 6 log levels, but let's say I want to actually look at all my logs that have some sort of K8 deployment log. And I can just click here, run it again, and I'm seeing all these log counts for my Kubernetes deployments. But typically what people do is they search for error logs. And this is the first time I'm typing in this app is I'm just changing alert to error. So super easy to follow through and actually change for what you want because it's a fairly simple language that we have for DQL. And from here, I'm starting to see, okay, these are my case deployments. Here's where I'm seeing the most amount of errors. And this is where, let's say I work for the checkout service team. This is where, again, I can just click in, filter for, and now I'm starting to see all my log lines for my case deployments of checkout service. And I'm just going to let it run. And I'm seeing all these permission denied, or the caller does not have permission or whatnot. So I'm immediately able to start looking into exactly what I want and in a logical hierarchy, like I said before. But let's say, you know what, I don't actually want it to do my checkout service. Let's say I want to look at for example, my gatekeeper controller one case deployment. So again, I'm just going to filter this, remove the summary, just so it's not just showing me the count, it's showing me the actual content. And I can see based off my previous query, there's a new branch. So this is my checkout service right here. And this branch is for my gatekeeper controller service deployment, I mean. And I'm able to see the logs for each one, go back and forth. And the really cool thing is I'm able to color code them as well. So that way, when I'm visualizing this pattern of what I'm doing, I can just right click and all the logical hierarchy from here on down is going to be green. All the hierarchy from here on down is going to be yellow. And it's going to be super easy to keep track of what I'm doing, how I got here, and all the notes that I have available. And on top of this, just to go a little bit more into what we can do with the security investigator is you can start filtering by exact terms. So for example, let's say I want to only look at my TLS handshake errors. I can just right click here, or I can just highlight it, and then I can do filter for again. And now it's going to create that DQL query for me where it's going to look for all the log files within my gatekeeper controller deployment and the ones that contain the TLS handshake. And I just run this again, and I'm able to see a new logical hierarchy in yellow, and it's showing me all those log lines that have TLS handshake errors within them. So yeah, that's really the power of the security investigator. And you can obviously go a lot deeper into it where you can start inputting patterns and more security context within it. But for the purpose of today's demo, I'm going to keep it very simple and just show you how you can just click through Dynatrace UI. You don't have to be an expert DQL, and you're able to get this type of information right away. Did we want to take some questions?
Omar, this is take some questions, but before that, I want to throw in some commentary here because you're walking through some new capabilities that many people are probably not seen before. And when I started today's presentation, I mentioned that Dynatrace is sitting on top of a gold mine of information. And what you've just done is you've actually shown us how you can delve into not just the metrics, traces, and logs, but the content that's being stored in those log lines. This is absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure that if you work in the observability world, you can immediately see the value of bringing this to, say, the security teams and letting them know that, hey, you know what, we can answer a lot of questions that would probably be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to actually answer in a traditional way. So this is fascinating, groundbreaking stuff. Really appreciate you walking us through that. So before we go on to the next part of the demo, let's take that moment and answer some of those questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so how is AI used in data analytics? So there is a couple of different ways. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share my screen. So, for our team in the control booth, be prepared. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen now. And let me flip to this illustration right here real quick. So here at Dynatrace, one of the things that we talk about is different approaches of AI for different specific use cases. We actually have what's called a hypermodal AI, which is part of the platform. So that Davis AI that we talk about has different AI models for different types of uses. For example, the one that we use and have been using very successfully for the past decade or more is our causal AI component. It's based upon effectively a deterministic model. So unlike classic machine learning, and this is a little bit of history here. When we started investigating what we needed to do for the Dynatrace platform, we knew at the time, a decade ago, that we had to have some sort of, for lack of a better term, artificial intelligence that would be at the core of the platform. We looked at approaches like machine learning, and what we realized very, very quickly was that classic machine learning approaches did not lend themselves to the rate of change that we were expecting to see in modern applications. A modern application, you can spin up a whole bunch of Kubernetes containers at a moment's notice. And when you're done, when whatever the business need goes away, you can deprecate those containers just as fast. So they immediately go away. Well, what we discovered was machine learning can't keep up with that rate of change. Like spinning up clusters, pulling them down that quick, just couldn't keep up. What we looked at was some very interesting approaches that we saw being used with the FAA, US Department of Defense, NASA, and they were using what was called a deterministic model. These deterministic models lend themselves to fault domain isolation. So they were very good at pulling out things like a root cause of an issue. So that's one part of our AI. But what we also have, we have a predictive component that does use traditional sort of machine learning type algorithms. Where is this useful for? This is useful for doing things like anomaly prediction, being able to do forecasting. And in this case, we're using statistical methods, classic sort of machine learning approaches, and you can utilize those inside of Dynatrace in things like your notebooks. So when you're in a notebook, you can actually use a Dynatrace analyzer to predict or forecast where a value might be in a certain period of time. Now, the last component is probably the one that everybody's been talking about. The zeitgeist in the industry around this is just next level. And that's, your generative AI. So your LLM, your large language model sort of approaches. What we realized was that there is a lot of value that generative AI can bring to the Dynatrace platform. However, because unlike the causal AI, the deterministic AI, which is explainable, every time there's a root cause, you can see exactly how we arrived at that root cause. It is absolutely explainable. There is a chain of events that you can use to say, this is how we determined that's the problem. But with a generative AI, it doesn't have that same type of explainability. And so what we realized was it would be very useful in different contexts. For example, the way that you interact with the platform. Um, you know, asking a natural language type question and having it generate a DQL query, asking it to generate a certain type of dashboard, or how do you do a certain task inside of Dynatrace? From that standpoint, the Davis Copilot, which is a generative AI approach, makes a lot of sense. So that's an excellent question. Thank you very much for asking that question on how we utilize AI. That's great. So let's get back to some of our other questions. as a person familiar with Salesforce and ServiceNow and have a good knowledge about them, do you think that Dynatrace would be the perfect place to grow your work experience in? It's that's a super interesting question. There's this inflection point in the market right now, and Dynatrace is right there. Basically what I've been seeing in the industry, and Omar, you tell me if you're seeing the same sort of things. There is effectively organizations are gravitating towards a certain class of solution. ServiceNow, for the ITSM on the ITOM side, 100% they are a significant vendor in the space. Salesforce on the CRM, plus the Salesforce app engine that's out there. All of these apps being built on top of Salesforce. We actually, as part of the new platform, we now actually have an app that can be used to monitor Salesforce, Salesforce applications. So, yeah, definitely, that's a really super interesting question. We see, definitely a convergence where our customers are, for core observability. Dynatrace remains, a significant component when it comes to, the acting on things, that ITSM piece. A good chunk of our customers, 100%, are connecting Dynatrace to ServiceNow. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you can look for, and this is a good exercise for anyone, is go to the ServiceNow store, and there is a service graph connector that literally plugs Dynatrace data into ServiceNow. You can use it to basically pull information from our topology model, from our Smartscape, and have it automatically populate CIs inside of ServiceNow. So the additive approach is that you have fresh CIs that are constantly being streamed into ServiceNow from Dynatrace. When Dynatrace detects a problem and generates an ITSM ticket, that ITSM ticket is always going to have fresh CIs plus contextual information back inside of Dynatrace as to what the actual cause of the problem is, along with all of the details. So you can immediately see the additive value of taking these two components and putting them working together. So Dynatrace and ServiceNow, absolutely, we see this all the time in the industry. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions, or how are we doing here in the control room? Think we're good? Okay, so Omar, back to you. What else do you got to show us?
All right, perfect. Yeah, so speaking about the goldmine information you were talking about, is that typically, when users are in Dynatrace and looking at all this information, let's say you're in the Security Investigator app, you're looking at errors and you're trying to find out what's causing your application to go down or some sort of issue you're having or some sort of outage. Typically, we don't think about from an IT perspective is that all these, errors and impacts, they have a business impact. And there's actually a communication struggle between the business side and the IT side of a lot of these large organizations. Is that every time you have some sort of IT outage, there's definitely a lot of business impact. You're losing a lot of dollars, and we don't see much of the industry correlating those two sectors together. And this is where this next app I'm about to show really comes into play, super handy, and that's the Business Flow app. So right here, this is essentially, just to go over what this Business Flow app is, this is built based off business analytics, which at the beginning of the call, I know you had mentioned about a blog that our CTO had put about business analytics. And this is built based off all those business analytics metrics. So just to go over one example of the Business Flow app is, let's say you are, the IT team trying to work with the business team and trying to correlate how the user flow happens through our IT infrastructure and what the dollar values are between each of those steps. So for example, here, the beginning of our user journey is viewing item. They could loop through quite a few view item steps. And then once they find some item they like, they go down, they add the item to the cart, they proceed to the checkout, they select, let's say you want, 1-day delivery or 2-day or whatnot. And then they enter the address, they proceed to the payment, they confirm, pack the parcel, and then you keep going down all these steps where you basically deliver that package and you close the order. Now, through this flow, typically it's very hard for organizations to distinguish which exact step we're seeing issues on. Which steps is our IT working perfectly fine, we're not seeing many issues, and which steps are we losing dollars on? And this is where this business flow app comes into play. And at the top right here, I'm just going to show it is small right now, but I think you can still see it. We're looking at the last 3 days worth of data. So I can see here at the top right, I'm filtering for the last 3 days, and I can see how much revenue we're having. So for this example app, we have a minus 17.98% revenue for the last 3 days compared to the previous 3 days, or the average that we see. We're seeing quite a bit of conversions that are being dropped. We see an increase in our errors, which makes sense because we have a lot of conversions drop and loss in revenue, and our average duration has increased compared to what it was before. And this business flow app can show you exactly where we're seeing these issues and pinpoint it to exact business transactions for users and where we're seeing these issues. So for example, in this view right here, the main issue that we first bump into is the payment confirmation. Is there's some users that they come in here and we have some correlation IDs that are going to pop up here, and their payment confirmation is not going through. So for me, through this business flow app, I don't want to look at all my business flows. I want to look at the ones that have exceptions or the ones that I see errors in. And I can just click here and it's going to automatically show me these are the business correlation IDs that are from top to bottom are all the same. So that this correlation ID from the view item all the way to the close order, it's jumping through all these steps so that I can correlate, the entire flow within one view. So for example, here, let's say I want to pick a random correlation ID right here, and I'm just going to click on it and it's going to show me all the steps that this transaction went through and what happened through each event. So I scroll here, the user, viewed a bunch of items. They finally added one or two items to their cart. They actually added four. And then, they went through the flow. And we know that this user ran into an issue. So I can start taking a look at, okay, what's their order total amount? It's $9,000, which is actually, you don't want to lose out on this order. If you get a couple of these, you're already in thousands of losses from your IT infrastructure. I scroll here to the right and I'm seeing, okay, what's the error? Well, this is actually not an IT infrastructure error, but we can see from the logs that it's insufficient funds from the user. So you now can correlate what you see from your logs perspective, from your business analytics perspective, to your business side of your enterprise, and seeing exactly where you're seeing, the money drop, the revenue drop. And it's just as easy as this, is that you set up this business flow app and we're going to start telling you exactly where these errors are coming from. So it's insufficient funds means like, likely your IT is doing fine, but the user is a bit low on cash right now to keep going with the order. But there's probably plenty of other examples where, for example, some sort of payment decline. So for example, this one, it's payment timeout. So we know there's probably something to do with this Klarna payment that it may be on our side, maybe on their side. It timed out, but now we know why this user did not go through with their order.
Omar, I got to stop you there because I've been in the industry long enough to know that we're verging on magical sorts of conversations. This is I have not, in my experience in the industry, been able to see someone walk through a complete end. We talk about end to end all the time here at Dynatrace, but it's always in the context of observability. I want to be able to see when a user clicks on something, everything that happens when that transaction goes back to a database, a queue, or a mainframe. And that we talk about end to end. That's end to end from the technology standpoint. But what you're showing us here is completely end to end from the business context. And that's super exciting. I've not seen anyone else in the industry really talk about this, let alone be able to deliver on it. The idea that you can, now, even if part of the transaction is going off to a third party, which in this case, that example is perfect that you showed, where we're, getting a message back from Klarna that, there's a timeout on the payment. These are, that's a third party, right? That's going to be, they've got their own IT system, but now I know where the problem is. I know who to have the conversation with to solve this. This is next level stuff. This is so exciting. I really appreciate you walking us through this, Omar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're seeing real life examples. This is a demo example. We're seeing real life examples of companies actually understanding where they're seeing the issues, how many dollars they're actually losing. Because in this example, we're actually seeing the order amount. So we know if this fails, we're gonna lose X number of dollars. So 1,700 in this example because of an issue from our third party vendor or whatnot, or some sort of delivery. So yeah, like you said, this is next level stuff that we're starting to just start, taking a glimpse at in the industry for how we're actually correlating this within Dynatrace.
And the fact that this is being delivered in near real time,
Oh yeah,
it just totally blows my mind. This is not a I'm going to drop a whole bunch of data into a data lake and have a data scientist mull over it for a couple of weeks and then generate a report. This is immediate. So
exactly.
fabulous stuff. Listen, we're near the top of the hour. We're near the top of the hour. I don't know if the control room, pardon me, do we have any final questions? Think we're good? I think we're good. All right. So you know what, Omar? Any last minute things that you want to mention and talk about? Oh, looks like there was something here. Like the flow chart. Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you
Thank you,
for the
Terry.
comment. Really appreciate that. Gareth, thank you very much. Appreciate that comment. I saw our good friend Mark Tomlinson. Throw out a hello there. Hey, Mark, how you doing? He's like one of the great people that we get to work with all the time on observability topics. Omar, so any final comments? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I just want to. I'm hoping everyone got a lot of value out of what I showed, and the amount of information that we can have within Dynatrace, how we can put it into context, how it's super easy to just view and click through. You don't have to be an expert in Dynatrace query language or whatnot. It's very easy to use, and the context that we provide, I'm just hoping everyone got a lot of value out of what we showed today.
Omar, that was an absolutely fabulous demo. I really appreciate it. It was so different from, almost all of the demos that we've done in the past on Get to Know Dynatrace. We've always had great content, but you're showing us exactly what our sort of third generation platform, what we can do now with the new platform, with the new data lakehouse, some of the options that are available to us with the automation engine. It's super powerful, super exciting, and an absolute game changer. And I think you just totally nailed that demo. So thank you very much. And folks, with that, we'll call it a day. We'll see you next time on Get to Know Dynatrace. Remember, sign up if you can for Perform. Take advantage of the early bird pricing. And if you're brand new to Dynatrace, go to dynatrace.com/free trial. Take it for a spin. And with that, folks, we'll see you next time on Get to Know Dynatrace.